Welcome to Passport to Wealth, the podcast for U.S. expats ready to take charge of their finances while living abroad. I'm your host, Arielle Tucker, a certified financial planner, enrolled agent, and fellow expat, here to help you navigate the complexities of cross-border life with clarity and confidence. Nicolás Castillo, welcome to Passport to Wealth. We're excited to have you here. Nicolás is the founder of Rook International CPAs and Advisors, a boutique tax firm that specializes in solving complex U.S. tax challenges for individuals and small businesses with international connections. With years of hands-on experience helping U.S. citizens and expats around the globe, Nicolás has become the go-to expert on navigating cross-border tax obligations, foreign income reporting, and IRS compliance. From clarifying the rules around the foreign earned income exclusion to advising digital nomads on avoiding double taxation to helping global entrepreneurs choose the right entity structure, Nicolás delivers practical, high-impact solutions with clarity and confidence. His ability to break down technical issues into understandable strategies makes him a trusted resource for clients and fellow professionals alike. We're thrilled to welcome Nicolás to Passport to Wealth to share his insights and help our listeners master the art of stress-free, strategic tax planning, no matter where in the world they call home. Nicolás, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Arielle, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so we have to take a step back because we have done a bunch of work calls together. And it's been so great to kind of get to know you, get to know your expertise a little bit in these calls that we kind of go into together, because we bring you in when it's things on, small businesses, a lot of people who are looking to move to Spain, where you're currently based. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Spain.
Yeah, so, I think it started like a lot of people, their stories did, where, the pandemic, my wife and I, we were, we changed jobs because, the pandemic came, and I was working remotely for a number of years. And once the call to office came, and we realized that we really loved working abroad, working remotely, we said, why don't we take this next step and try living abroad and working from there? Because our job was location independent. So at the end of 2022, we moved over here to Spain, which is somewhere we had visited too many times when we were traveling, when we were first dating and whatnot. And we've just loved it. We speak Spanish, so it kind of facilitated that move. And it's been a really awesome time since. We've been living in Madrid. Probably not enjoying the summers too much because of the heat. That's the tough one. But the rest of the year, everything else is awesome about living here.
And are you originally from Miami? I know you did your master's in taxation in Miami. So is that where your home base is for you?
Yep, born and raised in Miami.
Okay, great. And you're also a CPA. We talked a little bit about that. We were talking before the show, the differences between a CPA and an EA. I'm an EA, so I'm a full tax nerd. You are a CPA. You can do everything.
Yes, exactly. The letters, they mean a lot of the same things.
Yep. You can just sign corporate audits, and I can't, right? That's the difference. Is that the way? Yeah.
Exactly.
So I am really curious because you touched on, my wife and I just wanted to go and work remotely. And was that something that you guys just did on your own, or did you actually seek approval from your employers to be able to go and work remotely?
So we briefly sought the approval and were denied very quickly. So for that reason, we went searching for another job that would be fully remote, fully location independent. And that's the one that, when we both had that, we left, we made it happen, and we worked that job from here in Spain.
Okay. Because I think I just want to say that that's an important thing to know, right? We get a lot of calls from individuals who say, oh, I work remotely, therefore I want to move abroad. And I think it's really important to just take a moment to say, just because your employer is allowing you to work remotely anywhere in the US does not mean that your employer will let you work anywhere in the world, and certainly not for an extended period of time. because just like every state has its own, US tax considerations, every country also has those considerations. And so if you suddenly have your employees setting up residence in foreign countries, that can cause some additional tax considerations, and also just like even like social security. Needs to be paying social security for you, and is that your company or you? And so it just can cause some issues. So it's really important to get that approval and make sure you understand what's possible with those kind of remote setups.
Yeah, yeah. I think we talked to somebody about that on one of our joint calls, and it's not because the employer is being a jerk about it. It's really there's a tax reason, there's a financial reason behind it, on top of being in a different time zone, perhaps.
Yeah. And I think, there's just so much compliance behind it. And so it's just important to make sure those things are done correctly. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious from your experience working with US citizens overseas, what are some of the most common tax mistakes that you're seeing expats make?
I think the most common one that it happens year after year, hundreds of people fall into this trap is they read a few articles, they watch a few TikToks, and they think that, okay, I'm living outside of the US. I haven't stepped foot for 35 days. They see that test that we'll talk about probably soon, and they say, okay, I don't have to file a tax return at all. And that's very wrong, because almost always an American has to file a return when they're living outside of the US. It's just whether you have to pay tax while you're abroad, which may not happen because of all the different rules that exist. So I think there's a really poorly interpreted version of the tax treaties that are out there that make people think that once you're outside of the US, you're free of US tax obligations. But Uncle Sam planned around that, and we have to be very aware of that when we're talking to people and trying to put education out there.
Yeah. And I came up into the tax world, and maybe you did as well, during the big disclosure programs in the like early 2010.
Yeah.
We had all those OVDP programs having people kind of come into compliance, because there's over 9 million Americans abroad, but I don't think there's 9 million tax returns coming in abroad. But so there
Right.
is this kind of disconnect, because every other country has residence-based taxation. And then we have the US, which is really an outlier with the citizenship-based taxation. And until that changes, you are financially tied to the US, whether you like it or not. And really the path forward there is you don't make any money, so that you are below the filing thresholds, which can be as little as $5,
Yeah.
or you go through a formal expatriation, which is like a divorce from your US passport.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very intense process to do that expatriation, and it's not cheap either. They've increased
Mhm.
the fee on that because they don't want people doing that just for on a whim, and then you know come to regret it a couple of years later when they can't move back to the U.S. They can't get a job, and they're going through that whole process like a foreigner.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to know under everything that's happening politically in the US right now. It is so important to understand that, and my this has always been, my advice when people come to us and say, okay, I really want to pursue expatriation. To me, it's not a tax decision. Real,
Right.
right? Like it's a much more personal decision. Do you like having, access to get on a plane anytime you want to get into the US? Do you potentially do you still have family that you want to see? And I always go back to the pandemic, when borders globally shut down. And if the borders globally shut down again, do you want to have the right to get into that country? Yes or no? You might not agree with what's happening politically, but you might have aging parents that you want to see.
Right. Yeah. And if you give up the passport, you give up the citizenship, you lose a lot of those options.
So one of the things I've always just respected you so much for is you really have this great lens, and kind of your practice focus is really towards serving businesses and small business owners, those who are self-employed. So I'm curious, how does running a business or earning self-employment income while living abroad kind of change the picture for U.S. expats?
I think it's a an eye opener because all of the compliance that comes with that, and talking about compliance in two different countries now becomes really difficult. And you can DIY it, it's a possibility, but it's so difficult to miss something with one or the other country, maybe both, that you're not going to be as efficient as TurboTax on your own personal tax return while you lived in the US. That's a DIY, sure, you could do that. But when it comes to doing your quarterly bookkeeping and tax reporting in Spain, for example, submitting those payments, do you have to consider VAT when you're there? Plus, doing the US side, doing your quarterly payments in the US, which are still technically a requirement, but how much do I pay now that I'm paying into Spain? How much do I have to think about for Social Security taxes? So for Medicare and FICA, those are all things that change. And if you don't really know the rules and you're not really familiar with it, you can very easily miss a step. And even further, the international reporting that we have to do have they carry the highest penalties of most US compliance. So if you file a return with your foreign activity, incorrectly, or you miss it entirely, you could be subject to at least $10,000 per mistake. So it's really a high risk endeavor to be trying to run on your own.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is where we see like a lot of complexity. And it's another point to just note, like, again, we have the US has different filing thresholds. So to me, this is like a complexity issue. It's not a money issue because you just need $400 in self-employment income to trigger that filing requirement. So that's not a lot of money to make your situation quite complex. Another thing that I see in Europe is there's just we play by completely different rules in Europe as business owners, right? And so in the US, I think it's important to note the US remains one of the most business friendly countries in the world, right? You can go and just like hang up your shingle, form an LLC in 30 minutes. It's very, very easy. There's not a lot of bureaucracy involved in setting up a business in the US. And so you kind of have that mindset as an American. And now you go and you want to live in Spain or you want to live in Germany or, I don't know anything about South America or Asia, but like all these different countries, every country has different rules, right? You might have to prove you have a minimum number of clients and where are those clients located and how are they paying you? And, for visas, some countries really are trying to attract business owners, other countries are not. And so it's just important to kind of, when you put those two things together, it's just, does this country have a Social Security totalization agreement with the US? Where am I paying my Social Security taxes, right? Or am I suddenly potentially doubling my exposure because there's no agreement? Now I have to pay it to the US and to the foreign country. There's a lot to consider there.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen it with setting up a Spanish corporation. You need a 15-page business plan. You need to show contracts that are pending. It's a major process compared to going online to the Florida Sunbiz website and paying $100 and you're set up.
Yep. Yep. So one of the things that I know that you talk a lot with your clients about is kind of thinking through like strategic entity structures. So like either forming a local company or staying US based. Um, is there anything that expat entrepreneurs should be kind of considering for tax efficiency?
Yeah, I think one of the really important things is that when you are in Europe, all of the things that sounded good when you were in the US, like having an S corporation, maxing out a SEP IRA or 401k from your business for the tax deductions, a lot of those things they disappear when you're living in Europe and the tax changes there because, the rules are totally different. A lot of things like an S corporation, they don't exist in the local law. So how does the country treat that? So it's really important to know when you're setting up or when you're moving to a country, which is the ideal business structure for your type of business, for your level of profits. And that's something that varies but from country to country. So, one of the things that we I like to highlight because it's so different is that, an S corporation in Spain or in France is a death wish. It's a terrible idea in both countries. But in Italy and Portugal, it can work. And it's in Italy, it's actually not a very bad idea. Um, we tend to think that one size fits all, but it's really not that way. And even within those countries, depending on your type of business, whether you're a software consultant or you're selling pies in a bakery, right? Um, Business will be different. The best business structure will be different for each of those activities. So it really is important to think and get a bespoke plan for everything that you're planning to do.
I think that's such a great point. Like I think too, the long traditions of different kind of business guilds or activities and how the tax, like local tax regimes may kind of tax or create different opportunities for these different guilds or these different professions. And we don't really have that in the US, right? And so again, it's just really important to know like everything I knew from the US does not apply. And it's very country specific. And so I think you and I both have had people who like, I want to move to Europe. And it's like, okay, that's a big place. There are lots of different rules within, this continent. And so it's really important to kind of think through like what maybe 2 or 3 countries and then take the time to run multiple scenarios. That's very time intensive. It's not cheap, honestly. But if you're really looking to kind of optimize the tax, I think that's kind of the exercise that you have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. Because any one thing in your situation can tip the hat in one direction or another. Wealth taxes too. That's a huge issue that changes people's minds, even within the province you choose in Spain, right? Whether you go to Madrid or Barcelona, the wealth tax difference can be huge. So yeah, it's really not it's a really smart idea to plan it ahead of time. Don't just move and then think about it after.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know Spain has been such a hot destination lately. Everyone wants to move to Spain right now. Um, and I'm curious, are there any particular visas or unique opportunities that you're seeing people kind of come over right now to take advantage of in Spain, particularly?
So I think the digital nomad visa is a huge opportunity for people who are self-employed. There's a number of other visas that help people who aren't self-employed come over into the country. But what's really interesting is, everybody focuses on the Beckham law and, this special tax regime that brings you down to 24% flat on almost everything. And that's great knowing what Spanish tax rates are normally. But
Like close to 50%, just for anyone who doesn't know. That's normal rates,
yeah,
right?
yeah, close to 50% between the income tax of the federal equivalent, the provincial income tax, and social tax. So it can be pretty rough. And so the Beckham law is great. And it is very hard for self-employed people.
Can you just define the Beckham law? The Beckham law is 24% up to, is it 600,000 for
Yes,
euros per year for up to 6 years?
that's right.
Is that okay? And
That's
then
right.
once that expires, then you're subject to local taxation if you continue to be a resident.
That's right. So 24% flat up to 600,000 euros per year for 6 years, and foreign income. So you have dividends or capital gains or crypto is tax free, which,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
awesome. It lets you be in Spain with probably one of the best tax situations that exists. Um, but it's only available if you are a employee or you don't own more than 25% of your employer, your company. So for self-employed people, we're pretty much struck off of that. Um, but there still exists opportunities that they're still named after soccer players. There's the Mbappé law that exists for people moving to Madrid, where you can invest money into a local fund, local businesses, basically to develop the local economy a little bit, and you get to that 24% tax uh, federally, um, and you are exempt from the Madrid provincial tax. So it helps you get to a Beckham position without being the Beckham situation. A lot of people don't realize that. There's a lot of nuances like this in Spain, in France, in Italy, where if you only look at the surface thing that appears on the Google search, you're not going to find out exactly what you need. But that's why it's really valuable to work with cross-border professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for kind of going in a little bit onto Spain. It's a country that I don't work with. And so I just always love kind of picking up these little tidbits on what's going on because I've seen this massive amount of increased interest in Spain. And I'm very happy to send those people to the right people. So I'm curious, for someone who's just moved abroad or is preparing to, what are some of the first steps that they should be taking to kind of help prepare them for their kind of getting their US tax situation organized?
I think the first step to getting the U.S. tax situation organized is to talk with a local tax person, because the U.S. tax, the really big deduction that you will get when you are living in, let's say, in Europe, is where we talk to most of our clients. But anywhere that has a local tax, you have to pay that tax first in 90% of cases before you pay the U.S. tax. And so by controlling that local tax, you are able to control your total global tax situation. Um, so my recommendation is always to try to find someone locally that can advise you on the the local country issues, and then make sure that your US CPA can, follow up and handle those as well, right? And file the foreign tax return correctly, allocate the income to the right country based on the tax treaty, etc.
Okay, and I want to expand a little bit on that, right? So, a few things. One, if your local accountant, your family's been using them for generations and they're based in like Boise, Idaho, like they might not be the right fit for your new international situation. Even if they're a CPA and they say, oh, yeah, I can figure this out, they may not be able to figure it out, because one of the things that I know I've seen with our clients is getting an international accountant, and even one who specializes in certain countries, who doesn't just say, I do all international. They say, I specialize in Spain, like I know you from specializing in Spain and France and Italy, and a couple other European countries. You get to know the local systems and how those two systems interact. And you also have a network of local advisors who you can kind of plug people into, where if you are if you're working with that local accountant, they're not going to have, any type of international network to just even bounce ideas off of. Right.
Right.
And so I think that's one important thing. And so if you're struggling to find someone locally, find someone who's an international accountant, like doing US, and talk to them and see who they partner with or they work with. I think that's a really good thing, because you also don't want to find a local accountant who's so local that they have no other US clients. They've never seen a US 1099. They don't really understand the documents that you're bringing them from the US. So there's like this fine balance there. Most countries especially in Europe, when we're talking about Europe, have higher tax rates than the US. So I completely agree. In those higher tax countries, we always want to be kind of, as much as possible, trying to optimize the foreign tax rate and see what the opportunities around there. But not all countries have a tax rate that's higher than the US. There's also a lot of countries, like for where I specialize, Switzerland, for example, a lot of our clients, end up paying additional tax back to the US because our federal rates are lower here, or just how the tax is calculated is just so completely different from
Right.
the US. So it's important to kind of understand what type of country you're moving. Are you moving to a high tax country? Are you moving to a low or no tax country? Because there's also a few countries that have no tax.
Yeah. Yeah. And, again, the country you're thinking about really changes your US strategy. So if you're thinking about a few of them, there could be wildly different results in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's wrap it up here. On a personal note, I'm really, really curious, Nicolás, outside of taxes, what's one piece of advice you'd give someone planning to move abroad and start their expat journey?
I think one of the best pieces of advice is to try to integrate as much as you can. Learn the language because that's step number one. You'll feel a lot better sense of community that way. Just get involved, do activities. I paint, for example, which is just a fun way of getting out and meeting people and sitting and chatting with people in the local language. And that's a huge uh, mental hack, I think, because, it fights that sense of imposter syndrome of, oh, I don't belong here. If you try, your best, the old college tried to be a part of the community, be there, be one of them, rather than, you know, uh, the person that's making everyone speak English for you. So I think that's a huge mental relief, and also, just enjoy life because that's part of the point of the move to Europe, I hope. And take long walks, take a long lunch, enjoy your coffee. Don't sip it and run, unless you're in Italy. That's, I think, the cultural thing to do there. So,
Yeah, you just
that's,
stand. You don't even sit down. You just stand, right?
yeah, exactly. It's espresso, bomb, go, boom, go. Um, but enjoy life. Take it slow. Leave some of those American habits of working until the sun goes down behind.
Awesome. Nicolás, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much. And I will put one plug in. Nicolás and I do coaching calls, right? So if you're thinking about moving to Europe and you would like to book a call with us, we have that on our website and we'd love to chat with you a little bit more. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thanks, Ariel. Have a good one.
The content shared in this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered financial, tax, or legal advice. We encourage you to consult with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, or other licensed expert before making any decisions based on the topics discussed. Everyone's financial situation is unique, and personalized guidance from a